It's 6:30, so, and I know Kim is ready in the BevCam booth. Thank you, Kim. So before we call the meeting to order, I will just quickly touch on our agenda. We have very few agenda items this evening. We have a couple motions and orders. These are ordinances that are either for final passage tonight or first vote tonight. And then the bulk of the purpose of this meeting is for the council's final vote on the proposed FY24 budget. So with that, I will officially call to order this special meeting of the Beverly City Council, Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, 6:30 p.m. Ms. Kent, will you please call the roll?
Bowen? Here. Crowley? Feldman? Here. Hausman? Rand? Here. Rotundo? St. Hilaire?
Here.
Sweeney?
Here.
And Flowers.
Here. Thank you, Ms. Kent. Councilor Rand, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Councilor Rand. Councilors, because the bulk of the purpose of our meeting is to consider the proposed FY24 budget, I would entertain a motion to take our agenda out of order so that we can start with motions and orders and just take care of that business. That's perfect. Councilor Rand, right along. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That carries 6-0. So that takes us to motions and orders, and we have order 162 for a first reading, first vote tonight.
Order number 162, order that the City of Beverly, City Council of the City of Beverly hold a public hearing on Monday, June 26, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. at 191 Cabot Street, 3rd floor, Council Chambers, live on BevCam. Chapter 270, Vehicles and Traffic, are summarized generally as follows. Proposed amends the fine for overtime, non-regulation device violation from $15 to $20, and the for regulation device violation from $20 to $25, and create a fine for overnight parking violation in the amount of $25, Chapter 270, Section 63. Redefines off-street parking lot MPLA as located at the rear of 218 Cabot Street. Dollar lot is located at the rear of 226 Cabot Street. Cabot lot, Chapter 270, Section 66B, 2G1. Redefines off-street parking lot MPLB is located at the corner of Chapman Street and Federal Street. Dollar lot to located at the corner of Chapman Street and Federal Street. Chapman Federal Lot, Chapter 270, Section 66B, 2G2. Redefines off-street parking lot at MPLH as located as Cabot Street Public Landing Lot to located at Cabot Street for Harbor Master Lot and Bridge Lot, Waterfront Lot, Chapter 270, Section 66B, 2G7. Amends the hours of operation of off-street parking regulation devices in the waterfront and Summit Congress lots to Sunday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Holidays are free. Also prohibits overnight parking at the waterfront and Summit Congress lots between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. Chapter 270, Section 66B2. Creates an off-street parking lot located at Water Street Restaurant Lot, which is time-limited parking in which parking a vehicle for a period of time longer than 3 hours is prohibited, in which overnight parking between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. is prohibited. Chapter 270, Section 66B2H. Excludes the waterfront, Summit Congress, and restaurant lots from off-street parking lots for what employees of businesses located within the downtown Beverly Parking District may purchase a parking permit. Chapter 270, Section 66B2C. The full text of Order 162 can be read in the City Clerk's office during business hours, and this was in the newspaper on June 16th.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kent. So order 162 is for a first vote this evening, not for final passage. Will be available for final passage following the public hearing on order 162 next Monday, the 26th. So councilors, is there a motion to approve 162?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So that's 6-0 on this first vote. Again, not for final passage this evening. Thank you, councilors. Then we have two proposed ordinance changes that are available for final passage this evening. The first, Ms. Kent, order 164.
Order number 164, proposed amendments to Article 6, Section 192, lodging houses are summarized generally as follows. Amends the date that renewal applications will be mailed by the city clerk from September 15 to no later than August 1st or upon request for new applicants. Amends the date completed renewal application must be returned to the city clerk from October 15th to no later than September 1st or within 30 days of receipt by a new applicant. Amends the date completed renewal applications will be sent to the relevant city inspectors from September 15 to no later than September 1st or upon the receipt of a completed new application. Amends the date completed inspection reports are sent to the city clerk from November 15 to no later than October 31st or within 60 days in the case of a new applicant. Amends the date renewal application presented to the city council from December 7th to no later than November 30th or within 30 days of the receipt of a new application. Authorizes the city clerk to issue a license forthwith upon the city council's vote to grant such license and no later than December 31st. Authorizes the city council to attach reasonable conditions to a license to operate a lodging house. Authorizes the city council to issue a license to allow for applicants to remedy inspection violations and complete reinspection and to extend such probationary license issued a license or allow the license to expire. Authorizes the city council to, upon notification of a violation of any law, code, regulation, ordinance, or license condition, or any other condition, incident, or circumstances that raise a question regarding the fitness of the license to operate a lodging house, to conduct an investigation and a hearing to determine whether the license should be suspended, revoked, and/or deemed the license to be on probation. Create a fine of not less than $100, no more than $500, or imprisonment for not more than 3 months, or both, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 104, Section 24, for operating a lodging house without a license issued by the city council. The full text is on Order 164, can be read in the city clerk's office during business hours, and this is in the paper on June 9th, and this is for final passage.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Is there a motion to approve Order 164?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That carries 6-0 for final passage. Oh, sorry, Ms. Kent. Order 169.
Order 169, be it obtained by the City Council of the City of Beverly as follows. In the year 2023, an ordinance amending an ordinance relative to Chapter 270, Vehicles and Traffic, Section 270-49, Off-Street Parking, Handicap Parking, amended Section 270-49 as follows. Add a handicap sign and space across from 25 Broadway on the southerly side of Broadway, easterly of the driveway to number 26. Ordinance to take effect upon publication and final passage, and this was in the newspaper on June 9th. This is final passage.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Is there a motion to approve Order 169?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That carries 6-0. Thank you very much, councilors. Thank you, Ms. Kent, for all that reading. So this takes us back to unfinished business from a previous meeting. That unfinished business is our final consideration of Mayor Cahill's proposed FY24 budget. Mayor Cahill is here with us this evening, along with many members of his team. Mayor, I don't know if you'd like to say anything before we dig into this portion. You're welcome to do so if you'd like.
Thank you, Madam President. And as Mr. Ailes has declined to come up and say anything, I want to just give a couple of thank yous, but I also want to acknowledge and thank the several department heads who are with us tonight. So this is a test for me. Chief O'Connor, our fire chief, Wangari Fahari, our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging director, Allison Babin, our library director, and we have Mr. Ailes' finance team, Carol Ogolevitz, Rose Jafrida, and Amit Chiani are all here. Pauline Teixeira, our HR director, human resources, you know Jocelyn, well, you know them all. Jocelyn Welkersker, my chief of staff, Jim Butler, our inspectional services director, Darlene Wynn, our planning director, David Gelano, our purchasing agent, and you may or may not have had the chance to meet Gabe Hannafin, our airport manager, our newest department head. But thank you all for being here, and I guess I just want to say a couple things. First is, always need to thank all of our department heads for the work that goes into building the budget, and especially the finance team, and especially Mr. Ailes, who is, you've heard me say it, I don't know that we could ever find anyone better. He does an amazing job for the city every day of the year, and I'm grateful that we have him. So I want to make those thanks. And also, just a couple thoughts on the budget. You know, a lot of great work went into it. You know, we're going to continue together, assuming you folks give it your approval. we're going to continue together to deliver really high-quality services to the people in this community. And as we all understand, what a city does, what a city or town does, is mostly deliver services. And most of those services are delivered by people. So most of the costs of delivering those services are wrapped up in our staff, our employees, in salaries and healthcare costs and pension costs and other pieces to all that. And so while I'm saying that, I want to make sure that I give a thank you to all of our city employees, because they do this work day in and day out throughout the year in terms of delivering such high quality services to our residents, to our visitors, to people who work in the community. And so it doesn't just happen, right? A lot of fantastic people and good faith effort day in and day out. We're faced with some challenges, which you well know, in this year's budget, chief among them, healthcare cost increases, and we've made, I think, some really sound decisions about how to address them and how to really get on top of them. Nobody wanted a 16% premium increase. However, that's got us in a position that I'm very hopeful that next year we'll be back to a very manageable annual, conversation about premium increases. We made made changes to our retirees' prescription drug program. We had a really fruitful and positive meeting with a couple of hundred retirees earlier this afternoon, walking through those changes. But these are steps that we've had to take to really get on top of the healthcare costs. And I say that as well because I wasn't able to be here as late as you all the other night, so I didn't get to participate in the conversation about our request for free cash approval of $600,000 to support our road and sidewalks program. And I want to thank you as a body for passing that. I understand that there were a couple of concerns raised, and I just want to address them. One, I did say to you folks at a budget hearing recently, and I want to reiterate that we have been working with our team at engineering and DPS and finance to try to put together more of a look ahead, right? More of a three-year plus look at how we're going to be planning for and improving roads and sidewalks going forward. And that should include, more transparency, more ability for people to look ahead. That can be a bit of a double-edged sword because, you may not see your road or street anywhere in the foreseeable future. So, we'll all have to really communicate well together and through us to our constituents throughout the next several years on that process. And I did say that we're looking to have you folks come in and meet with us and kind of look at all that in the coming weeks, recognizing that we're, now that school's out and we're getting through this process and people will be trying to take vacations, we'll work with you and try to make sure that in ones and twos we're able to have those conversations. And then I know a concern was raised that we're not appropriating or asking for you to appropriate as much in the operating budget as we did last year. The $2.7 million in city money that we were able to collectively appropriate in FY23 is somewhat of a high watermark. We moved that way over several years. Our ability to put $2.7 million in city money, this time around with $600,000 of it being free cash and 2.1 in the proposed operating line, it's not a given. Year to year, we've got to really look hard to try to make sure that we're able to. And I know some of you had expressed a concern that that 2.1 may be seen as a cut. No, it's not a cut. I think we all understand we're putting $2.7 million into this year's program, into this project year, into this coming fiscal year. And you also know that always kind of overlaps each other, right? Fiscal years are July 1 to June 30, but our construction seasons are spring to late fall. So we're managing together, hopefully, based on the pending vote, to achieve that, to put that type of level of resources into our roads and sidewalks. We pair that up with the roughly $1.05 million that comes from the state, and we're almost to $4 million. We're $3.7-ish million, right? So I think we collectively have set a high priority on roads and sidewalks. We also know that it's never enough. But I just want to put the focus on the fact that we have and are asking to do again this year, and will continue to do everything we possibly can. I know that you get more calls on roads and sidewalks than anything, because I get them too. I know that, quality of life for any given resident in the community is made up of many things. And what you see and what you drive on and what you walk on day in and day out really matters. So, as I said a couple minutes ago, it's my sincere and fervent hope that we are getting on top of the healthcare in a way that will allow us to do different and more things a year from now with next year's increase in property taxes and with next year's new growth allotment. And that in that way, we'll be able to look to restore, to move back up closer to, and perhaps all the way to 2.7 in an operating budget number in FY20, I guess that will be FY25. But again, what's in front of you in this request, together with what you approved the other night, makes those resources available in the way they were this past year. And I'm excited about that. We have done some great things and will continue to. Anybody who's driving up and down Colin Street now sees that it is finally, repaved. Took some time. We're going to be getting to Beckford, right, in the very near future, and we'll be getting out publicly in the coming weeks just exactly what the rest of this year's program looks like with your help. So that's probably enough. Last thing to say is, I joked that Mr. Ailes didn't want to come up. He's been up here nonstop for the last few weeks with you, and my last word is to go back and thank him one more time, because it's a big undertaking. He does it incredibly professionally and at a high level every year. Thanks all.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And certainly there's no doubt Mr. Ailes has been putting in his time here at this podium, so thank you, Mr. Ailes. You can just write notes and hold them up. So for members of the council, we'll be following sort of the same procedure that we did last year for our vote on the budget. So I will first just invite anybody who wants to make a general comment, a statement about the budget, just sort of overarching. We'll take those. And then from there, we'll go to if there are specific cuts or changes that anyone would like to propose to the budget. If you would make that proposal in the form of a motion, if the motion gets a second, then we'll be able to discuss it further. Then we'll vote on that motion, and then we'll go to any further proposed changes in the form of motions. Does that make sense to everyone? So given that, are there any general or opening statements that anyone would like to make? Councillor St. Hilaire.
So I have some general comments, and I do have some amendments I'd like to propose. If it's okay, I'd like to pass out to the council some information about what I'm proposing.
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Feldman. So you'll see here both a list of amendments as well as a reminder on the road and sidewalk heat map, so you can have that at your reference. First, I want to thank Mayor Cahill, Finance Director Ailes, Budget Analyst Jerry Perry, and all the city's department heads. It's been a long couple weeks. I appreciate everyone's time and attention, both to preparing the budget and also answering all of our questions. I also want to thank the administration at the outset for delivering on their commitment with the new ClearGov digital budgeting tool. I think this advancement's been a significant improvement for us as a council, for our ability to analyze, look at the budget, and also for the public. And I think that's a huge step forward in terms of ensuring transparency and responsiveness in our government. So I want to thank you for that. The review and approval of our city's budget, to me, is our number one priority as a city council. And while I appreciate that many people have touched this document and worked hard on this and many hours have been spent, ultimately, this comes down to us and our decision, and I think it's important that we take that seriously. Mayor Cahill's budget is an increase of to 157 million, 6.9%. I'm sorry, 6.9 million, or 4.6% increase over last year. And despite the budget continuing to grow at a healthy pace, it includes a $600,000 reduction on road and sidewalk paving, as we've talked about. As a city council, we've been discussing budget priorities amongst ourselves and with the administration for the last 2 years. And repeatedly, I think we've talked about the poor condition of our roads and the need to better address the backlog that we all hear about every day. At our city council retreat that President Flowers organized at the outset of our term together, we discussed road and sidewalk paving, and this was one of our top, if not our top, shared priority as a group. For perhaps the first time, Councilor Houseman, as Chair of Finance and Property, held a budget priorities meeting at the outset of our budget discussion. The goal of that meeting was to make sure the mayor and his team understood our priorities and to make sure there was alignment in the budget process. And during that meeting, we again made it very clear that road and sidewalk paving was our very top priority. And, I think it's important to note that it's our top priority because this is the issue we hear about most from our constituents. For me, there is no other issue that comes even remotely close to road and sidewalk funding, and I hear about it almost every day, I would say. And our residents are not wrong, right? Our roads and sidewalks are literally crumbling, and it is impacting quality of life for them and also increasingly public safety. Our own technology produced a map of our road conditions and shows an overwhelming number of streets shaded in red or dark red, which indicates that they're in serious or very poor condition. And again, that map is available to you. I remind you to take a look at your ward or across the city and see how many streets are in red. We've heard estimates from our budget analysts and public services commissioner that we need to be spending closer to $7 to $8 million a year to make any headway. And we have also pushed for this 3 to 5 year road and sidewalk plan to give our constituents better, anticipation of where they might fall or their street might fall on the list. I'm excited to hear that the administration is working on that, and that's going to be a great step forward. And I also appreciate that we approved a free cash transfer earlier this week of $600,000 or even tonight. But the budget needs to reflect our values and priorities. And, I want to comment on the exchange Councilor Houseman and Finance Director Ailes and Budget Analyst Perry had the other night, where they talked about how the very first thing we cut is road and sidewalks spending. If it's the very first thing we cut, it's not a priority. And to me, this needs to be in the budget. As Councilor Rotundo smartly said the other night, level funding is really a decrease when you consider the cost of materials and labor increasing. And to me, this should be like everything else that we do. It should be forecasted out, it should be budgeted, and we should be planning on addressing this priority. Tonight, I have 17 budget amendments that collectively reduce the budget by just over $600,000. I'm recommending that we put this money back into the budget for road and sidewalk paving projects. In proposing these amendments, I'm operating on a couple different thoughts here. First is, number one, the condition of our roads and sidewalks is unacceptable, and we need to do something to change the way we prioritize it. We need to increase funding. Despite Mayor Cahill's correctly saying that we're funding it at an all-time high, it's not anywhere close to addressing the need. And it's gotten to where it is over a period of long time, and I don't blame anyone for that. But if we want to address this issue, we can't keep doing what we've been doing. I also am operating with the assumption that a $600,000 difference in our budget is less than 1/2% of our city budget. There are many areas in our $157 million budget that contain flexibility and or assumptions. We've talked about those the last few weeks. We've talked about the executive office budget and accounts like the reserve for unforeseen. We've talked about the solicitor's budget and the way we budget for potential litigation costs. We've talked about consulting line items that may or may not be utilized in full. Our own budget analyst described a mini reserve in an account that we have for his role. And while our process allows us only to delete or decrease line items, I want to point that out because I'm confident Mr. Ailes, with his talents, could very easily revise this budget and make budget assumptions or transfer different things where he sees the biggest flexibility. But our process doesn't work like that. In order for us to address it, we have to delete or decrease. My proposed amendments tonight are designed to not impact delivery of core municipal services. And generally speaking, they are in 5 areas. First is the repurposing of what I consider to be unbudgeted items or otherwise line items that have been identified as having significant flexibility. B, reducing or eliminating reliance on outside consultants, especially in areas where we've had increases in staffing levels. Third, proposing that we take a 1-year pause on city staff attending some conferences, non-required trainings, and other industry association meetings. There's a number of departments that have these line items. Level funding some areas that saw increase. There's a couple areas in the arborist budget that the administration is proposing increases. I'm proposing we level fund those areas and put those money back into roads and sidewalks. And then lastly, reducing management salary increases for 24. Management salary increases this last year approached 7% on average. And I think, we need to address a priority. Again, these are not things that I propose Mr. Ailes or the mayor would want to see happen, and I'm confident, if they had the ability to put 600,000 in, they might take it from somewhere else. But again, we don't have the details the way they do, and for us to do our job representing the people, I think we need to do our part. And so there are 17 items. I don't know, President Flowers, if it makes sense to go through each one of them or to review them or vote on them as a package. To me, the goal here is in the collective, right? It's not in any one particular line item. So, that's my comments. I'm happy to make make amendments if that's what you want to do. I'll leave it there.
I appreciate that, Counselor. If it's okay with you, if there's other counselors with a general statement, we'll go to those. And then, Counselor St. Hilaire, I hear what you're saying. I would sort of defer to your preference, but I hear you saying this is sort of a package proposal. So in that case, I think we could entertain a motion when we get there and discuss it as a full package, if that's what would feel best to you, or if you wanted to take each one separately, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay.
Before we come back to Counselor St. Hilaire's proposal, are there other general comments or statements that anyone would like to make at the outset? Counselor Vaughn.
Thank you. I had a few notes prepared that won't exactly follow that directly, but I think will follow the mayor's comments a bit directly, because I first wanted to add a thank you. I know we've been thanking department heads throughout this process and staff, but particularly wanted to thank the mayor and the finance team for really, I think, going that extra step that we were looking for in putting together the digital tool, really being able to see this new format that's easier to navigate, easier to search, gives key information about each department, helps to start to make those links between money that we appropriate, what happens with that money, goals for next year. So it made this process a lot easier for me. So personally, I'm grateful for that, but I think it's also a big step forward for the city. And also know that was not an easy lift, that took a lot of thinking. It took a lot of work by department heads and staff to translate everything into that new system. So wanted to close where we started with thanks. And also a thank you to our budget and management analyst, Jerry Perry, for helping us navigate the system as well. And really, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I saw during the budget hearings that I'm most excited about coming up in this current year. And some of them might show up on here, but we'll see. So the first one was just happy to see the continued and even increased investment in our community services work. So additional investments in the health department, in veteran services, and really focusing on staffing and programming there that helps connect residents with social services, mental and behavioral health resources, things that are just particularly important right now, but always important. And so making sure that those departments that are sort of the entry point for a lot of people when they're facing a challenge that they don't know what to do next. So including our senior center, our libraries, everything within that community services bucket. I was happy to see that this year's budget continued to step up some of those investments, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what that means for residents over the next year and where that's headed, with new leadership also thinking about what we can do in those departments. I was excited to hear the commitment during the hearings and again tonight to get that sort of longer strategic planning look forward on roads and sidewalks. And also heard, on the sort of financial side of that, getting updates a little bit more regularly on sort of what's happening within the Roads and Sidewalks Capital Fund, since at this point in the year, we authorize a transfer of some size into that fund, and then it, sort of moves out of the general fund, isn't reported back in the same way that other department lines are. So knowing that will be available to us going forward is, I think, also a great step forward. And hearing the commitment that we'll get some more visibility into project management as some of those new systems come into place over the next 6 months or so. I think that's going to be really exciting to help the public see those linkages for major capital projects, of which we have some new ones now in the pipeline, sort of how those steps go from the funds being appropriated, what the status is at any given point, how much has been spent to get us to that point, what the plans are going forward. So knowing that, I think that's a really exciting sort of development within this budget and within the next budget year that we're going to be able to see. So, you know, I think the last one that I wanted to highlight was just the way that we're investing in young people, not just in the school department budget line, but also, you know, the change that's incorporated into this budget to no longer charge counselors in training to participate in the Parks and Rec summer programs, the creativity to find funding not reflected in this budget, but in our spending to increase services at the McPherson Center, and the work that's ongoing to just improve the overall capacity at the center. So I hope over this next year we see that impact, and that helps the council commit to maintaining those investments going forward, and that we see them in future budgets. So I think overall, I came in tonight really excited to see what the full $157 million proposed would get us. I think given that the council did approve an additional $600,000 from fiscal year 23 funds to be available for fiscal year 24 roads and sidewalks projects, I no longer see the urgency to make cuts. And I also, see the case for providing a little bit of a nudge using the few tools that we have as a council at our disposal. So while I think there are probably some things on the list that we may get into that I think clash with what I'm most excited about making investments in, there may be other areas where it's true, sort of being able to send a message about how we prioritize funding could be of value. So look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bowen. Any other councillors who would like to make just sort of an opening or introductory comment? Okay. So with that, we'll go back to you, Councillor St. Hilaire, if you'd like to make your proposal in the form of a motion, and then once seconded, we can have further discussion.
Okay. I would make a motion that we cut the following line items. Line 57820, reserved for unforeseen, revised from 250,000 to 0. Line item 57811, reserved for non-union employees, revised from 200,000 to 50,000. Line 51891, expenses in the executive department, reduced from 17,500 to 0. Line 54282 in the executive department, reduce from 2,800 to 0 for recognition. Line 57301, the executive department, other charges and expenses, dues, reduced from 17,000 to 0. Line 57105, the accounting department, other charges and expenses, meetings, reduced from 5,000 to 0. Accounting department 53034, consultant line item, reduced from 23,000 to 0. Solicitor line item 53079, litigation, reduced from 135,000 to 90,000. Planning department 53034, consultant, reduced from 55,000 to 45,000. Planning department 57105, other charges and expenses, meetings, reduced from 2,000 to 0. Engineering department 51810, temporary help, reduced from 10,000 to 0. Engineering department 53853, engineering consultant, reduced from 40,000 to 0. Engineering department 57105, other charges and expenses, meetings, reduced from 5,000 to 0. Arborist, 54602, tree replacement, reduced from 55,000 to 45,000. Arborist, 58410, beautification, reduced from 20,000 to 15,000. Health Department, 57100, other charged as expenses, travel expenses, reduced from 5,000 to 0. And Library, 57110, staff development, reduced from 3,500 to 0. In total, $600,000, $600,800. That's my motion.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a second?
Second for discussion?
Thank you, Counselor Rand. So with the second for discussion, we can have further conversation now about Counselor St. Hilaire's proposal. Counselor St. Hilaire will go to
I'd be
you
happy to
first.
expand upon my rationale on some of these, if that's helpful. You know, in terms of the reserve for unforeseen and reserve for appropriation. You know, again, we've talked about this line. When I first got on the council in 2015, this item was under 100,000. There are other ways for us to pay for unforeseen expenses in the city budget. There's other flexibility. I'd rather see this money, it's a big pot of money, spent in other areas. The salary increases, again, you know, we had 7% increases on average for city management across the this year. And again, I don't like cutting people's salaries, but we need money in roads and sidewalks. They got big raises this year. I think, you know, taking one next year would be important. Expenses, again, you know, other flexibility. I don't know that we need to be going to conferences all across the country when our roads and sidewalks are crumbling. You know, in general meetings, you know, I feel like all these, you know, non-required meetings and trainings and all these things, while they may be valuable, I can't support sending staff to all these things when literally I can't get a road or sidewalk paved in my ward. Solicitor budget litigation, this has fluctuated greatly over the years. Again, there's other mechanisms to pay for it if we need it down the road. Consulting, we've added staff in the planning department, we've added staff in engineering, we've added staff in other areas, we've made changes. You know, I think we need to reduce our reliance on consultants. The tree replacement ones, these are basically, there were increases to the programs this year for both beautification and tree replacement, so my proposal is reduce it back to level funding to what they were last year. And that's a summary, so I'm happy to get into the details. Mr. Perry, looks like you want to comment? I defer to you.
Thank you, Counselor St. Hilaire, and I was going to say the same. I see that Mr. Perry appears to be ready to comment in some way, so we'll go to Mr. Perry, and then Counselor Sweeney, I saw your hand, so.
I just had some questions for Mr. Perry, so I'll let
Oh, well,
him.
this is well-timed then. All right, thanks, Counselor. Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. I do rise to talk about the amendments of Council St. Hilaire. First off, my compliments to him. He took some time and effort to look at this stuff. This is my 7th budget. I think it's the first time I've seen this, so it's a good intellectual exercise, so it's not a bad thing necessarily. My role for you is to, I have to be careful of my role. My role is to advise you, and I will not be advising you in any way, shape, or form on, at least with his sheet, items number 2 through 17. Those are operational items that the councilor is suggesting to be cut, and that's a decision for you to make. I make no position. To me, that's a policy decision, and I defer to the judgment and wisdom of the council with regard to that area. But I do need to rise, and the main reason I'm rising tonight is on the first one, and specifically his suggestion to cut $250,000 for the reserve for unforeseen. I would be remiss in my fiduciary responsibility to you all and to the city as a whole if I didn't rise on this area. This, in my opinion, is a very bad idea. And I respect the councilor's position, but every municipality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts does something like this. It's either reserve for unforeseen in the city budgets, and in town budgets, you see it as a reserve fund under the care, custody, and control of what is known as a finance committee on a town level. It's something you really need to do. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future. I don't know how much snow is going to fall this winter. I don't know, as an example, that the elevator at the library crashed. I didn't know that the forestry, we're going to talk about this Monday night, I didn't know that the forestry truck wouldn't pass inspection into things. Things are going to happen this year. We have no knowledge of what's going to go on. And as such, it is very wise of any municipality, whether it's the city of Beverly, a town, doesn't matter, to have some sort of a reserve for unforeseen. I would urge the council not to cut that budget. It's a bad idea. and that's the only reason I rise for that. Beyond that, again, I defer to your judgment. I will not make any recommendations on the other, suggestions of the counselor. It's up to you. The only other, if I may, Madam President, just as a quick sidebar to all of that, you need to, as a council, pass a budget before June 30th. Otherwise, we shut the doors down on July 1. I'm sure and hopeful that you will do that tonight. I would advise you to do something tonight anyways to get the budget passed. And I do remind you once more, as I said in the beginning of this process, which has been long and arduous as it is in the month of June, you do have a balanced budget before you. If you pass it as proposed by the mayor, you'll get a tax rate. If you even pass the councilor's amendments, it'll be in balance too. I don't dispute that. So it's important that you remember that you do have a balanced budget, in my opinion, before you. Madam President, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you or your colleagues may have, or I'm more than happy to sit right back down again.
It sounds like, if you would not mind staying, it sounded like Councillor Sweeney had questions for you, and other councillors may as well. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam President. And that really was my main question, Mr. Perry, which you addressed regarding the reserve for unforeseen. And, I spend a lot of time in municipal finance in my day job. In the town that I work in, we have a finance committee reserve, so I can, back that up. I guess thinking about it, it's either money that we would have to pull from free cash for these expenses if they were to ultimately come up, or money that's appropriated in the budget. And regardless, the council has to be, the transfers have to be proposed to the city council, and we have to approve them. So I do want to commend Councilor St. Hilaire. As you mentioned, Mr. Perry really took the initiative to go through this budget and propose these reductions. And again, I see a lot of this stuff in my day job, and I know it's a time-consuming exercise to really go through budgets and weigh the impact of cuts. So I appreciate the value that you've provided to the council in doing this work. Just to add some comments, in looking at, so as Mr. Perry just mentioned, the reserve for unforeseen, and then kind of similarly the reserve for non-union employees, the total of those two amounts are $400,000. And then with the only other one that I flagged with litigation, essentially in that case it would be a similar situation where, while we don't have to authorize the use of the funding if we were to reduce it, and then the council would have to authorize the funding if it were to come before us as a request, that money would just go back to free cash if it weren't spent either. And that's, $450,000 or so of the $600,000 that you proposed, Councilor St. Hilaire. So I'm leaning against supporting this, but I do want to note, I think you are absolutely correct about the need for increased funding for roads and sidewalks. I certainly voiced my opinion on that subject matter at our public hearing the other night. My only concern, while I don't think your sentiments are unfounded in terms of tightening our belt for certain aspects of city spending in order to free up more money for much-needed roads and sidewalks repair, I do have some concern, given that we don't have the same level of day-to-day operational knowledge as the department heads and the administration that recommended this. So that's why I'm hesitant to support the remaining $150,000 or so in cuts that you've proposed. One thing I want to say is I certainly do think it's worth imploring the administration while everybody's here, as Councilor Bowen mentioned in some of her comments, we're able to do a lot with the funding that has been presented by the mayor in these various departments, and I think it will be important in future fiscal years, as economic times potentially get tighter, that we do as much as we possibly can to make our tax dollars go as far as possible. And so I want to commend you all in this budget process, and I could have made these comments generally, but as Councilor Bowen said, we did get a lot more information in this process than we have in previous fiscal years about department operations, goals, successes in previous years. And I think that information is really helpful for us who don't work day in and day out in City Hall. So that having that data, especially given that the city workforce has grown, understandably so, given that the challenges that we face as a city has increased. But that's something that residents rightfully point to and say, well, why is the workforce continuing to grow, and we may not necessarily be receiving a proportional bang for our buck in return for services. And so I think being able to tell the story of what your departments do every day through a process like this is really valuable. And so I want to encourage you all as we go through this process each year to continue providing that information. But yeah, rambling a little bit, I guess basically what I want to close with is, I think Councilor St. Hilaire, you're on the right track. Given that we have to approve transfers from the two reserves and that those are the bulk of the cuts that you proposed, I do not plan on supporting these proposals, but I think it's important as we get into a more difficult economic climate that we are really thorough in evaluating the budgets that we pass as a city council. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Counselor Sweeney. Counselor Rand.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilor St. Hilaire, for the information you put in front of us and for taking the time to propose amendments to the budget. I appreciate the sort of political statement and using the tool that we have available to us to say that that we would like to see a different system going forward for paving, which we've all talked about, you know, as a council and as an administration for the last few weeks and beyond that. I do appreciate that sort of political push. I will not be supporting these cuts for a variety of reasons, but I do want to take a moment just to say that, you know, I really value and believe in training for staff. Sometimes we talked a lot about retention this week. Sometimes that is the best way to retain employees and the best way to remain competitive and the best way to reduce our need for outside consultants. So while I understand that you were looking for a place to, you know, to make some cuts, I don't support that. Similarly, I would not support reducing tree replacement or beautification programs, some of which are kind of new and launching, mostly because I actually hear a lot from residents who want more trees planted. So you know, these are not cuts I would support. And to reiterate, I do appreciate the political tool you're trying to use. And I wanted to say, too, that I've heard a couple times up here that we don't have access to the day-to-day knowledge of departments. We do, however, have access to department heads, more so than anybody in the entire city, right? So I encourage this council, and this will be my last budget cycle, but, you know, successful cuts, which we have made before, have been done by working with department heads and finding that, like saying, look, this is really what I want to put forward. I'm going to make a cut. Where can we find it together? That's possible. That's been done before. It can be done again. I just want to remind us that we have that access, even though we're not there every day and we don't see spelled out on our budget the nitty-gritty of maybe what the trainings are. We can ask. So I am encouraged to use that to our advantage. And yeah, so I won't be supporting this, but I do appreciate the push. And I think it's a clear statement that going forward, the administration is heard loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Rand. Counselor Feldman, I know you're waiting, but if, with your permission, Counselor St. Hilaire, since we're sort of in a conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted
with
to
him.
respond to a couple of comments. First by Mr. Perry regarding the reserve for unforeseen. And just want to point out for counselors, the $250,000 in this account is less than 1/10 of 1% of the city budget. If we have a serious unforeseen issue, $250,000 doesn't get us very far. And we have other mechanisms in the budget, as Counselor Sweeney pointed out. We have a stabilization fund. We have healthy free cash balances. And we've seen time and time again where some of our bigger cost centers, the school department, public services department, they openly talk about how they move money around within the budget. There's flexibility there. That $250K doesn't need to be there. There's other ways to do it. And I appreciate other towns do things certain ways. Other towns also have nice roads. We don't. And, you know, to Councilor Rand, I appreciate your comment on the political statement. This isn't a political statement for me. This is our #1 priority that we've talked about for the last 2 years as a council. And level funding this isn't getting the job done. To me, this is this is our priority, this is not a priority if we're not gonna address it. And I like trees too, I like training too, but to me, that's not what our residents care about. Our constituents care about getting their roads and sidewalks paved, and we're not doing it.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Feldman.
Yes, thank you. I echo the sentiments of counselors before me. I appreciate the effort and the close look and the bringing this to our attention by Counselor St. Hilaire. And I too agree that this is our top priority in terms of what we hear from constituents and quality of life. But in terms of looking at this, and I know that we understand this, but just because we have the power to cut items in the budget, that doesn't mean we get to choose where that money goes once it goes back into free cash. And I, as a counselor who represents my constituents, I would rather know where that money is going in advance than have it go back into a pot in what seems like, at this point in the process, a bit punitive, because we didn't get all of the roads and sidewalks paved that we wanted. In that we also we aren't the boots on the ground, so to speak, in terms of why certain items exist in this budget and these line items. And, I don't feel it's fair to these department heads who we do have access to, as you said, on a daily basis, to have worked with them to cut some of these budgets, to say that to DPW, that the engineering or the arborist, that we would cut their budgets now that they're not here in the room, in the space with us, to take a closer look at that. So while I absolutely appreciate this, this effort, I think that this does send, as we saw with the small steps of the CIT program being, dropped with the funding, I think that with a concerted effort we are all in agreement on what needs to be pushed for going forward. And I believe if we do stay unified in our priorities in representing our constituents, that we will make those inroads without these type of cuts that are don't feel really fair at this juncture in the process to me as a counselor. So I cannot support that in whole at this finish line, not knowing where that money would go to in terms of and how it came about. So.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Bowen.
Thank you. So just wanted to build on some of the thinking around sort of how we as a council get to express our priorities. And so I think it's important to remember that anything that is in the, comes out of the reserve for unforeseen or comes out of free cash comes to us as a very specific request. Well, sometimes very specific, sometimes a little vague. But we then hold a public hearing about it, and we then get to take a vote on whether it can be used, whether those public funds can be used for that specific purpose. So at this time of year, we're saying that all 157,000 can be used at the discretion of the department heads for the things, for each category that's been laid out in the budget. If we were to make some cuts, then there's more money that potentially, we're still expecting the same revenues, and we've pretty conservatively estimated our revenues. So it's reasonable to anticipate there would be a healthy free cash balance and more requests coming our ways, and they would come with specifics. And so, even if we don't make cuts tonight, that will still happen with free cash. That will still happen with what's in the reserve for unforeseen. And if, as a council, we really want to make the statement that there shouldn't be new allocations for other projects before there are new allocations for roads, we could vote against proposals that came before us that didn't make a strong case for why they are more important than roads. And that was also sort of my thinking the other night in the free cash request for roads and sidewalks, that we could postpone that decision, not approve it immediately, wait until free cash is certified, and have another public hearing where the Public Services Department would come and explain what progress had been made with the first allocation of 2.1 million in roads and sidewalks, and have to make the case for how that next 600,000 was going to be used in a public way. So, you know, I think I'm sort of the mind that at this stage in the process, I don't feel that these cuts are probably the most productive for our departments, and think in the spirit of sort of what's behind these cuts and really the practical goal, more than just the statement, but the practical goal of committing ourselves as a council to our stated priorities, I would suggest, you know, to the council that we can make that commitment to really be considerate when we get free cash requests, when we get requests for transfers from one department to another because of those, you know, underspends in one category or another, that we're really thoughtful about how those each seems like a little one-off. It comes with, you know, a little bit of explanation, but that we ask for that greater explanation of where does this fit into the big picture, and why can't we use some of this for roads first anytime something comes in front of us. So I would say that's a strategy that we can take that uses our power throughout the year to have that discussion, to ask for the details that we need. And you know, if we vote against specific transfers at any given time, the administration can come back with additional requests at any time as well, with different justification or with more information. So that is a tool that is available to us. It's not that you know, the reserve for unforeseen is just a magic pot of money. We have a say in how that's used. So I hope we will use that.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Crowley.
Thank you. First off, thank you, Councilor St. Hilaire, for putting this all together. As I look in Ward 3 over this last year, and I look at our priorities, what needs to be done there, and I look at the map here, there's a lot of red when it comes to our roads and sidewalks and what we have and what we need to get done in Ward 3. So there's a lot of things in here that you've suggested that I could agree with. Not all of them, but I'm asking the administration is, we're adding a little bit more each year, but it's not enough. We've all talked about it collectively and all the way through. This additional 600,000 would probably put us where, when you guys were talking about level funded, would probably put us at about level funded for this year, because we've talked about the increase of materials and those type things and labor that has gone up. So I appreciate the 600,000 that we voted on the other night, but that kind of puts us where we were last year. So what I ask is that, you know, everybody's done well here as far as in the city, and I know we have to have growth in our departments and everything else like that to continue to make things better and to continue to grow and where we're at. But I ask is, where can we really take a sharp look if we're having opportunities for a few more dollars here and there? I ask that we really take a concentrated effort and put it into roads and grounds, you know, and as far as for the sidewalks and stuff, because that's all my constituents are asking for, other than my parks. But that's all they're asking for, as far as roads, sidewalks, and what are we doing? We've got a beautiful high school out there that we spent a lot of dollars with, but we neglected the back roads. We neglected Kittredge. We neglected those Russells for everybody coming through. We're just now getting some work done, but maybe as we start doing projects, as we start looking at the neighborhoods and holding those accountable then. You know, we also have the beautiful middle school and stuff. Well, we have Blaine Ave. We have some of the access points to where it's negligible for our students and our kids to be able to go to schools and be comfortable and be safe. You know, so those are the things I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam President. So just general comment and then a specific question about one of the pillars, I guess, that Councilor St. Hilaire flagged. But just to the points that Councilor Rand and Councilor Bowen made, I do think it's important that we utilize our role as councilors when we're evaluating proposals and also using our platform here to project our priorities, that we are pretty intentional about doing so. And then to Councilor Rand's point, we do have great access to the department heads in town, or in the city. And so it's certainly important that we as counselors, especially entering, maybe I'm pessimistic, but I do think it's going to be a challenging economic environment in the coming fiscal years. And so as other councils have said, road and sidewalk funding is a priority for me. And I know that it's a priority for the administration, and that you all had to make trade-offs in this budget proposal to get the funding level to what it is before us right now. And so I just think it's incredibly important in coming fiscal years and in this coming fiscal year that we're all very proactive in working with the administration and the department heads to make sure that, for me, roads and sidewalks is probably the number one priority, but that our other priorities are being funded at appropriate levels. And then specifically in this, Mr. Ailes, I'll pose as a question to you. One of the areas that Councilor St. Hilaire mentioned was consulting salaries or temporary help salaries that he had flagged, and in doing so said that as we have now staffed up, we may not need the same levels of funding that we had had in previous fiscal years. And based on the conversations that we've had in the previous weeks with each relevant department, and I flagged, it looks like Councilor St. Hilaire has proposed close to, or over 80,000 in reductions across engineering, planning, some of these departments that we've now been able to staff up to greater levels. Can you just confirm that the proposals for these various consulting lines across those departments were formulated essentially with a zero-based budgeting approach, where it wasn't just carrying over funding from previous years where we may have had lower staffing levels and required more outside consulting services, but that the budget was put together with this coming fiscal year in mind, in the staffing levels that we either currently have or will have at the start of the fiscal year, and then any various needs for consultants tied to specific projects that are going to be undertaken in this coming fiscal year?
Sure. So there, I see 1, 2, 3 different areas where consulting is mentioned here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, but I think I see 3. One being the accounting department, excuse me, one being planning, and one being engineering. In terms of the staffing levels within those departments, hold accounting aside, but for the planning department, for example, the budgeted staffing level has not changed year over year. What has changed is we've filled vacancies, but as you all know, there's been a regular revolving door within that department. And as you all know, a lot of the work that gets done through that department that are kind of ad hoc in nature, whether that's the master plan or a one-off for the Bass River overlay, or the parking studies, things that go on, that all funnels through this consulting line within that particular department. And Mrs. Wynn was intentional about labeling what the needs were, and Councilor St. Hilaire noted them here. The $45,000, that is a typical level of consulting spending within that department year over year over year. And in addition to that, there's the extra 10 that's proposed, 7,500 of which for historic district commission projects and 2,500 for department membership fees. There's various appraisals and things that go on throughout the year that are required to hit that budget. And so that's very intentional, that level and that ask. Similarly, in the engineering department, there hasn't been any staffing adjustment within the engineering proper. We did do some restructuring in the DPW administration. That has yet to take root because it's relatively new. But within the engineering department, they get asked to do just about everything that comes ad hoc throughout the year. And a lot of times they may need a little bit of expertise in a particular area. So although there is a little bit more flexibility in that line, it tends to typically always get used for various projects, whether that's us rushing to work on some of the pickleball court is a great example, where we had to get a consultant on board immediately to begin engineering that in advance to get that project rolling. This is an area that we would look to do that. With the accounting department, that one's a little bit different, because that of the 3 departments is the only department that has had a staffing adjustment. We were able to increase our staff level by 1. Mr. Chani's in the office here as the assistant finance director. What this budget does, however, is that it prepares us to set the tax rate. So that, as you know, working in Town Hall, there's a series of events that need to occur beginning now with this vote this evening, and certifications of the balance sheet, Schedule A, fixed assets. There's additional components to the annual auditing work that gets done that falls within this budget. And so this particular budget is prescribed very specifically by amounts of, you know, 5,000 for this particular initiative, 7,500 for this particular initiative. We did actually in this budget propose a reduction year over year because of Mr. Ciani coming on board. We know that there are some aspects to what we would typically outsource that we will be bringing in-house in the coming year, and so we reduce that down accordingly. But what's left there really is designed to get us to certifying a tax rate by the December deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President and councilors. I just want to go back to the first two departments, and I just want to take issue with the thought that a fully staffed department does not need a consulting line or the ability to hire consultants. Sometimes it's a question of particular expertise. Sometimes it's about the scope of work or work that comes up. You know, we recently prepared a grant application to take the Ogre Park study that was done around around the concerns around erosion along the riverbank and along the park, and we put some short money into a consultant recently to get ready for a grant application recommending certain strategies be funded by the state and utilized to build that, you know, to build that riverbank back up against the erosion, as an example. If we were doing nothing, we would not need consulting lines. We're doing things, you know. We're making application for, I don't know if it's I think it might be a CZM Coastal Zone Management Grant to look at Lynch Park next for the type of resiliency adaptation needs that it might face in the future. Just as we're finishing up the grant that is giving us a picture of what to expect going forward along the Bass River shoreline with rising sea levels. So those are just a couple of examples. But and well, I also, and I you know, want to echo, I do appreciate the hard look and the effort to, you know, to tug at. I think, you know, we all got to tug at our own, you know, conclusions and recommendations. But since you asked the specific question there, I do think that, you know, it's important to be mindful that that work can't be done in certain instances without that outside help. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor St. Hilaire.
So just want a couple of comments on some of the things I've heard. So listen, I've obviously was disappointed to see the budget cut road and sidewalk. The one thing we've been talking the last 2 years about is the one thing that this budget does not fund the way I would like to see it funded. It's clear to me, you know, the discussion the other night about this being the first thing that gets cut every year, right? Like that's where we go. To me, that's clear that our priorities are not aligned. And, you know, these proposed cuts, I appreciate that no one likes cutting anything and that everything has got a purpose. And we're talking about consultants, unbudgeted items, meetings, and as far as the arborist goes, I'm level funding the arborist to what they got last year. I'm not decreasing or cutting the arborists. The consultant line items, and I appreciate that, you know, there could be needs for consultants from time to time. I get that. We added a 6-figure role in finance. We've added a number of roles over the years in the executive department. Consultants should be one-offs for special projects, and I think we should have insight into what we're hiring consultants for and not just be giving line items that get dumped into these accounts. There's lots of good projects, but to me, we're not funding roads and sidewalks. We've got to cut somewhere, and I'd rather cut consultants than find somewhere else to cut. And again, maybe we need to change the way we think about how we take on projects. I know the administration has been doing their thing for 10 years. You do it a certain way. You like the way you do it, but there might be other ways of tackling a problem. And, you know, I get that this is disruption and this is change, but to me, you know, if we want to be serious about roads and sidewalk funding, we have to show the administration that we're serious about cutting the budget. And to me, I'd rather cut consultants and meetings and things that are unbudgeted that can be paid for in other ways, then tell the residents that, that I'm gonna see tomorrow and every other day that, guess what? Your road's never getting paved because we're never gonna be able to address it. And that's the reality.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions, comments, or conversation from counselors? Okay, so we have a motion and a second, had discussion. So with that, all those in favor of approving Counselor St. Hilaire's proposal, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. So that motion fails 1-5. Are there other counselors, actually, before I move on, I will say, because I didn't have a chance to weigh in on this, but I will say that Counselor St. Hilaire appreciated, it's already been said, but this way that you laid out your cuts and also made your motion was, I think, incredibly helpful and also engendered really, really good discussion. So I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Bowen. We are now 7-1-6. Just correcting my math, Counselor Bowen, thank you. Counselor Crowley, I'm sorry that I missed your hand.
I was a little late.
Your hand still matters, Counselor.
This is good.
Are there other counselors who have come here tonight with any proposals for amendments to the budget that you would like to make? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve Order 144, which is Mayor Cahill's proposed FY 2024 budget as presented, inclusive of enterprise funds and water sewer rates.
So moved.
Second.
Is any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. That carries 6-1 on Order 144. That is our final agenda item for this evening. Counselors, are there any announcements, reminders, or comments before we close tonight? Okay. Well, I will then just offer a word of congratulations. Last night was the Beverly Middle School 8th grade graduation and moving on ceremony, so congratulations to 8th graders in our community, including Counselor St. Hilaire's daughter, Charlotte. And also, we'll just mention that we do have another meeting next Monday, the 26th, at 6:30 p.m. There are some public hearings, additional transfers we heard referenced in our last meeting. We also do have a public hearing within the context of that meeting on Order 162. That's the parking and traffic changes Ms. Kent read at the beginning of this meeting. Members of the public can, of course, come and sign up to speak in any of those. We also will have that evening a presentation from the consultant firm with whom we worked on our race equity audit as a city, and we'll be able to hear from them about that audit and also proposals for next steps and where we will be digging into that work and moving forward. So as always, members of the public are welcome to join in person or follow us on BevCam. On that note, thanks to Kim in the BevCam booth for making this meeting available, as always. Thank you to members of city staff who are here with us, and Mayor Cahill, Mr. Ailes, thank you. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Baby steps after 2 years.